authentically peculiar, authentically peculiar, authentically peculiar.
Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. Welcome to Authentically Peculiar with Marcia, Season 3. I am so elated that we are going to be able to interview multiple guests as we are discussing the year of self. During this year, we're going to talk about financial wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, the journey to authenticity, overcoming trauma, and so much more. So stay tuned. Go ahead, like, subscribe, share, and even comment on Authentically Peculiar with Marcia on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, you can check it out on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. Take good care. We'll see you. Welcome back to Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. I am excited, nervous, anxious about our conversation today. As you know, that this is my guest, Dr. Brian Clardy. He is a professor at Murray State University, a history professor. He has written a plethora of books. He talks very openly, honestly, and will write a letter to our elected officials in a heartbeat to share his concerns. Uh, he is a delegate in the Democratic Party, and we are discussing this current election cycle. So, welcome back, Dr. Brian. Brian, I'm so
Marcia,
glad you said yes.
I am too. We are staring in the middle of the biggest political dumpster fire that we have seen since 1860.
Right. And that's such a scary thought
Yes,
because we have a lot of uneducated people about the importance of voting. We have a lot of rhetoric that's being spewed regarding voting. And we have a lot of people, I think, that's just not taking things like Project 2025 serious.
and they better.
And they better. If they, so for the audience, if you all don't realize it, that Mr. Trump's VP pick, JD Vance, is one of the authors of a section of Project 2025. So while Mr. Trump is saying he has nothing to do with it, oh, he's flat foot in it, and his running mate is there. So I just really hope our discussion tonight will open the eyes and the ears of all those evolved and just all residents, because you have to know what this could look like. So, from a historical perspective, Brian, share your concerns about all the stuff that's going on. We have the Republican National Party convention going on. Biden just got diagnosed with COVID. There's been concerns about his age. I mean, Trump's not much younger than him, only a couple of years. So they're still both older. What are your thoughts about what's going on right now?
There's so many different moving pieces. Let me just start with the most obvious. Donald Trump has a clear path to victory in November. Not only that, he not only will he have a clear path toward election for a second non-consecutive term, it is very possible that the Republican Party could expand its membership in the House. Mike
Mm,
Johnson may stay on as Speaker. It is very
mm-hmm,
possible that the Democratic Party loses the U.S. Senate.
mm-hmm,
And if Donald Trump is given a second term, he will have the opportunity to maybe fill two, possibly two, maybe three Supreme Court vacancies.
mm-hmm.
And therefore, Donald Trump will have control over all three branches of government. And he has already told us that if he gets elected, he will be a dictator from day one.
Right.
That's the first part. Secondly, this Project 2025, this has always been something that the far right has wanted for a long time. The Heritage
Mm-hmm,
Foundation was founded in 1973.
mm-hmm,
Um, this is, right after Goldwater, after Wallace, and all this. So conservatives wanted a think tank of their own, sort of as a response to the Brookings Institution, which is a liberal think tank. And they wanted something very similar, focusing upon conservative themes such as free markets, powerful military, deregulation, and eliminating the social safety net. Well, now it just seems like Heritage has gone to the far, oh so far right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
now they've gone, I'm going to say it, they've gone full bore fascist. That's what they've done. And
but they would say the Democrats are fascists.
Oh, no, they call us socialist, commie pinkos, whatever. I mean, most of them never even read Marx. But anyway, but that's what they're doing. They have a part of that. I know JD Vance wrote a section of that, but another part is as old as even 20 some odd years ago. John Yoo, who used to be a Heritage Foundation fellow, he taught in the law school at the University of California at Berkeley, served in the Bush administration. He was the author of the torture memos. He crafted an idea about 20 some odd years ago about the unitary executive, which would give the president more power that's really vested in the Constitution. All that happened with the white paper that the second Bush administration came out with, giving the president the right to launch a preemptive war, and we see how that turned out.
Right.
But now we're seeing it ensconced in Project 2025. And the Supreme Court, especially with this latest ruling, they're very complicit in the idea of a unitary executive. This would turn the presidency into that thing that Patrick Henry warned us about 200 some odd years ago. Patrick Henry said it is very possible that your president may very well become your king.
Right.
And I think that's what we're headed for now. Arthur Schlesinger is doing backflips in his grave. The imperial presidency has now come true. And it's going to be even more so true on November 4th if Donald Trump wins the White House.
Exactly. It's such a dark space for America right now. One, because we have so many people who aren't willing to hear truths about what we could face. We have so many people who have been empowered in their racism, empowered in their entitlement, for the lack of a better word, to put us in this state. The sadder part is most of these individuals are voting against their own interests. When I think about things like Project 2025, VA benefits for veterans, disabled veterans benefits are going to be reduced and or removed, because the thought is we need to see that you're disabled. So anyone that's having a mental health disability or any disability that is not physically associated, chances are your benefits are going to be cut. First day out of office, 50,000 civil service jobs are going to be gone. That's one of the first things that's on that agenda. They're going to remove things like Head Start. They're removing things like a direct path to college, because if your children go to public school, your children will be the first to have to sign up for the military, not private schools, public schools. So can you imagine the vast number of population of children that will be forced to go into military service, although they may be extremely intelligent and all those different things? It's such a dark place. Tell me your thoughts about Project 2025, and what are some things that stand out in that document for you?
They're talking about eliminating the social safety net. Now, I think you put it perfect.
Yes.
A social safety net that's been in place since the 1930s with the first and second New Deal, certainly since the 1960s, with the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson. It would make the poor an even more so underclass. We're talking about disenfranchisement, voter suppression. We're talking about banning of books and ideas, the war on public education, not to mention, and you touched on this too, the end of DEI initiatives as we know.
Yes.
and the gradual resegregation of America.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, also add to that too, and I'm glad the Biden-Harris campaign came out with this ad. They used the young lady who came out in Governor Beshear's ads very effectively against Daniel Cameron last year.
Mm-hmm.
Reproductive rights, you can forget about it. There will be a
Mm-hmm.
national ban on abortion. Abortion will be criminalized. Women will not have access to reproductive care. Their reproductive choice will be gone. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, women can
It,
forget about being full participants in society because
exactly.
diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives also benefit women. So they'll be locked
Exactly.
out of
Mm-hmm.
the mainstream of American life.
And even taking it back to the 1900s, the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, where men could physically accost their wives without any type of disciplinary
Right.
issues. That is back on the table with Project 2025.
Yeah, it is.
It's it to hear women, uh, I won't even talk about African Americans just yet, but to hear women want to vote because they've either been brainwashed to believe that they have no choice but to vote this way or this manner, or their entitlement makes them feel like they can do this and it won't haphazardly impact them. They don't realize how much they're risking their freedoms, their daughters' freedoms. It's a scary thought to think that you have individuals that are elected officials who have the mindset if a little girl has a menstrual cycle, that she's subject to be a grown man's spouse because she's menstruating. That's such a sick
That is very sick.
mindset.
That is very sick.
And to think that how do we protect our little people from all of this foolishness? My heart aches. I was sharing with another guest that in the 60s, you know, we were born in the 60s and came up through some ranks of the civil rights movement. I don't recall a time where the average citizen had to be armed for the sake of protection. Do you?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the rural South. You know, hunting was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
The men in my community, especially in the fall, they love to go deer hunting and different things of that sort. There was this notion that maybe you wouldn't need a gun to protect your home, but to
Mm-hmm.
go around flouting guns and
Mm-hmm.
celebrating gun culture and
Mm-hmm.
distorting the Second Amendment. And what do you need an AR-15 for? You don't need an AR-15 to hunt deer.
Exactly. I don't understand the need for an assault rifle, period. I am a gun owner.
I am too. I mean, I have
And
two
on
guns.
average, most of us are at this day and age, but I can't
Yeah,
imagine my need to carry a rifle like that. Um, it's just we've gotten to this fantasy land. I promise you,
yeah,
as hot as it's been, it almost feels like we're about to fall off the face of the earth anyway,
feels
because
like
it's
it.
one of the hottest summers that I can remember. Is
Absolutely.
it's just, and then the political climate. So you add the heat, you add the rhetoric, you add the uncontrolled lack of emotional intelligence into this big pot.
Mhm.
Do you feel like we're facing a potential civil war?
Maybe not a civil war as we had in 1861 to 1865, but we are facing a social and political explosion, the likes of which we have not seen
Mm,
since Appomattox.
mm-hmm. Wow.
I mean, like you said, all this confluence of all these events is becoming a perfect storm. And I do not
Mm-hmm.
mean to sound hyperbolic or like the boy who cried wolf, but you cannot tell me with all the mass shootings that we've had, with January 6th, with groups like the Proud Boys, with Nazis marching in the middle of downtown
Whew.
Nashville. 3 and 4 times they've done this. I saw it myself the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you cannot tell me that something is not going to jump off at some point.
Exactly.
And I thought it was going to happen Saturday. I was really nervous. I said, when President Trump had been shot, course, you know, I don't want to see him die.
Anybody get hurt, right?
I want to see him repudiated at the polls and humiliated. I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
see him in jail.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see him dead. But
Right.
what happened was when you had that, the first thing I thought about, there's going to be retaliation
Yeah.
against somebody. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be retaliation against them. And then we get into this vicious cycle where we do eye for eye, tooth for tooth, nail for nail. And before
Mm-hmm.
you know it, we're all bloodied and messed up.
And
So I was
it's,
afraid of that. We were dangerously close to
yeah.
that Saturday.
And that's what was so scary. I know, you know, that I work for the Veterans Crisis Line, and the uptick of threats coming through that line, the uptick of the anger, um, speaks volumes. So one, people don't realize that this anger that you're feeling right now, your benefits are going to go away while you're complaining, and you're following this rhetoric. I mean, Trump said it many, many years ago, when I run for any office, it's going to be Republicans, because, for lack of better terms, they're the dumbest people that you can get and can bamboozle to get to that place. You know, what do we need? What messaging do we need to tell, especially the younger generation that are able to vote? What can we say to them to encourage them to understand? We have 435 seats becoming available in Congress that has to be voted upon. You need to be at the polls. We have a serious situation in local legislation as well as national legislation. You need to vote. What would you say to them?
I would tell them the best thing they can do is watch, and it's going to sound strange when I say this, watch movies like A Clockwork Orange. Watch movies like 1984, which of course the Orwell book,
Orwell,
the movie. That is going to be our future.
Yeah.
If we don't stop this now, we will become a fascist police state in our lifetime. And I never thought that that would ever happen in this country.
You know,
it's going to be based upon violence, the rule of law. You can forget about it. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to be like the Purge movies or anything like that, but come on,
it's going to be close.
It's going to be. I think we're going to be dangerously close to something like that, some sort of violent outcome. I did see the movie Civil War when it came out a few months ago. And first thing I thought when I saw all the killings and the violence and bravado and all the chest thumping, I said, yeah, that's going to be us in 10 years.
Yeah. If not before.
Not before.
If not before. The difference between now and in the 1800s, there are some people that absolutely, including myself, not going to stand by and just let it run rampant. We're just not going to do that. I saw a news clip earlier today, maybe it was a TikTok clip where even in Germany, the people are marching against the right. 1 million Germans hit the streets because of them not wanting to lose the footing to these very restrictive, domineering type authorities in government. I think America is too comfortable.
We are.
With the laws of the land. And because of those levels of comfort or the faux comfort, people aren't raising their heads. People aren't willing to sacrifice, to get out there and to be a voice. You know, I'm a federal employee, so I can't tell people how to vote. But what I can tell you is your responsibility is to understand and know. Educate yourself on the Project 2025. Educate yourself on Project 47. What are your thoughts about the flip-flop on that?
Project 47 in what context? I mean,
so you know, Project 47 is presidency. What Trump is saying that he's running on, and not Project 2025. They're the same document.
They're the exact same thing. They're the exact same thing. Now, Trump wants to distance himself from Heritage, but let's be real. The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank. They support conservative causes. Donald Trump has somehow managed to get millions of Republicans to make them think that he's a true to life conservative, No, he runs in the face of Ronald Reagan. He runs in the
Right.
face of Robert Taft and Barry Goldwater. He is a crypto fascist.
Period.
Period. Full stop. So
Mm-hmm.
if he's elected, you can best believe that Stephen Miller and some of his people, of course, Peter Navarro just got out of the pen yesterday. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
More than likely, Trump would pardon Steve Bannon. They
Yep.
will be back in the White House, and they will
Mm-hmm.
make sure that they craft legislation to get a compliant Congress, which they will have
Absolutely.
to pass this stuff. And so, yeah, we came of age, you said, in the 1960s, 3 years after the Civil Rights Act, 2 years after the Voting Rights Act. As
Mm-hmm.
we go into our senior citizen years, we will have less freedoms than when we got here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is the thing that is scary. I shared with someone that after I retire, I may do another year or two here, and then I may be moving out of the country because my biggest concern at this point, I have grandkids, and I do not want them to come up in a nation where they're back at a place of no value. They're back at a place where they aren't seen. And I don't want to put them in a situation where at any given point, someone could be jealous because their grandmother may make a little money, or their mother and father may make a little money, or whomever. I don't want to see them in that place. And I never before had I even considered that until this last year, because it is a scary state of existence to see where politics has gone. We have infighting with the Democrats, which is disheartening in itself, because our truth is at any given day anyone can be diagnosed with COVID. That doesn't mean a death sentence. That doesn't mean anything else. My personal perspective, and you can certainly tell me what your thoughts is, it really isn't about Biden not being able to sustain as president more than the fear that Kamala would move into the role of president if something happened to him. I honestly don't think it's about Biden from a Republican perspective. It's the fact that she could possibly be the new world leader as the president of the United States. What are your thoughts?
There's that element. There's that element. And here's the thing. Okay, let's just say Biden decided to withdraw from the presidential race. There would be a rush on behalf of some Democrats to force or to get Vice President Harris to run for the nomination at the convention, to make her the nominee. Now, let's just be real. You're going to have some Democrats out there that are going to, and there's nothing worse than liberal racism.
Right. Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
Let's
call it out.
Let's call it what it is. You're going to have some people who are going to want to get Gavin Newsom in the race, get Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois in the race. There's going to be a Stop Kamala movement at that convention if that happens. And what will happen is, if they are successful and she is not the nominee, Black folk will stay home and we will lose for sure. So they had better play this very carefully.
Right.
And because Kamala Harris has far more experience to be president than J.D. Vance has to be a United States senator. He's only been in office a year and a half. Richard Nixon had more experience in 1952 when he became Eisenhower's running mate.
Exactly.
So to snub Harris at this point would be the worst possible thing we can do. So,
Absolutely.
The Democratic Party has a major choice to make between now and Chicago. Because I'm going to tell you, if we go into that convention divided, the country will see it.
Yep.
Trump
the
will
world
see it.
will see
The
it.
world will see it. And MAGA will run through the chambers and the halls of Congress like an open door.
Absolutely.
And then we are in a moment. We're in a moment. Because I kind of saw this 8 years ago. I kind of saw this 8 years ago at the convention in Philadelphia. I knew it was going to be a mess because of the WikiLeaks documents and all that. I kind of figured. And I saw the reports in the paper that Sunday before I got to Philadelphia that the Bernie people are going to be quite upset. Well, that was an understatement.
Yeah.
Got to the convention floor, and Bernie bros and Bernie sisters, they are showing completely out.
I heard, and I saw that.
When Dr. Cynthia Hale gave the invocation, and just the invocation, just the opening prayer, and she mentioned Hillary Clinton's name, you could hear those boos up in the rafters.
Wow.
And, you know, after they got gavelled in, as we saw a few speakers, we were rushed off to a reception that they had for us in the Kentucky delegation. I got on the phone to my mother, and I called her up and said, "How bad was it?" She said, "I hate to tell you, it was pretty bad. It looked like you all are divided." She said, "You be careful." And I have a sick feeling. I pray to God that I'm wrong. 2016 and 1968 will repeat itself in Chicago next week. If we don't get it together now.
So scary. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that my goal in us coming together was really so we could not be fear mongers, but really to get people to thinking and talking about what is actually going on during this election cycle. I've had so many individuals that said, well, you know, I don't know who I'm going to vote for because, you know, when Trump was in, we got those stimulus checks. And I said, well, did your student loans get written off? Was that more than the stimulus checks? Oh, well, I didn't think about that. If we can be bought for $1,500, and let me just go on record, Marcia didn't get a single stimulus check. Marcia didn't have her student loans written off. That bad bill still roll in every month and has to be paid. So it's not about that for me. But my real truth is we need to understand that we shouldn't be so easily bought for a couple of dollars.
Exactly.
We have to have a voice. We have to have knowledge. We have to have understanding. And we have to band together. There's no way around it. We have to band together.
The reason why the economy was so good under Donald Trump is because he inherited Barack Obama's policies and Barack Obama's economy.
Period.
Period, full stop. Barack Obama, the debt wasn't paid off, that's true. But Donald Trump exploded the national debt.
Yes.
During his presidency. So if there was any prosperity that fueled consumer demand, it was because during those 4 years, we were running up that credit card bill. And when you got an unlimited, you got an American Express or whatever credit card, you can be rich for a day. You can give the impression that you got it like that. But that bill is going to come due.
It's going to come due.
And so that you take that, and then the pandemic itself, which shut down, paralyzed the global economy. This is the mess Joe Biden had to dig us out of.
But most people don't take time to educate themselves on what that was like. When I hear people
very short memories.
Exactly. When I hear people say, oh, well, under Trump, I was able to do this, this, and this. You were, because he was actually giving you the residue off of the Obama administration. In those 8 years of positive momentum, he came in and immediately began putting things back into place for the upper echelon. He didn't really care anything about you all until it was time for him to get some votes, some accolades. True narcissistic form. I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to hold you up. As long as you're holding me up, the moment you turn your back on me, I'm going to talk about your wives. I'm going to talk about your kids. I'm going to do all of this childlike stuff.
Ain't that something?
How can people not see that?
What really blew me away and what was so telling to me was at the end of the Republican convention 8 years ago, Ted Cruz, I am not, N-O-T, period, not a fan of Ted Cruz. But I actually kind of chuckled when he gave that speech, and he did not endorse Trump. He said, vote your conscience. I'm like, y'all got to get him out of that hall.
Because they're going to kill him.
They're going to kill him. But I kind of was like, good for you, Ted Cruz.
Mhm.
And then he got to the Texas delegation breakfast and he spoke to the press. He said, "I'm just not in the business of endorsing people that insult my wife." I was like, "Oh boy."
Exactly.
Well, now guess what happened? Ted Cruz just kissed Donald Trump's backside so good,
Mhm.
and he has carried more water for Trump than Gunga Din.
Yep.
Now, how does that happen? What is so great and scary about Donald Trump, other than the fact he can sick folk on you through Twitter,
Mhm.
Instagram, Truth Social? He can get his people riled up. He did it January 6th. Other than
Mhm.
that, what is so
I just think that he
great about him?
has, kind of like Epstein had a book. I just think that he has a lot of knowledge on some people that
Us,
um, he's able to leverage. But I
right?
also think that he is talking to the weakness of individuals who want to be in power.
Yes,
And the only way that they can see that there may be some semblance of power is in this white nationalist mindset.
bingo. You nailed it.
And that's the thing that is despairing. That is the thing that is hurtful, because when we think about, we just finished our family reunion and we started digging back, and I've been able to get as far back as 1831.
Oh wow.
But to think about our ancestors who were just marks in books, to think about what they had to go through, having to forget how to communicate and their knowledge base and reading and all of that, to come to this country where they were stolen from their own, to come here and then have to fight to come back up. And yet we have individuals saying, oh, that was then. Well, can you tap into your heritage? Do you know where Papa and Mama came from? You know, can you get to that? And so for me, when I think about my grandmother walking in the civil rights movement and getting people signed up to vote and just all those different things, I have to educate. I
Mm-hmm.
have to get people to a place where they understand. And I think it's vital to have you on because you're a historian, period. I don't know another historian that I would hold water against with you
I
because you
can think
know
of
it.
quite a few.
Well,
David
you
Blythe
can.
is
That's your
one. John
field.
Meacham, Darling, Clark Hines, Skip Gates. I mean, I can name them. They're good. Amrita Myers. Oh yeah. But
But
thank
I
you. I
know, but
appreciate it.
as far as me, right, and my connection with you, knowing how you study history, knowing your intent on educating people about the truth in history is the reason why I keep saying, okay, Brian, we got to do this again. We got to get back out here. We
Yeah,
got
we
to
really
help
do.
people really understand this. If you were sitting, because I know some senior citizens are grappling with, well, who am I going to vote for? What would you say to the population of people who have yet decided how they're going to vote?
That you come from a great people who built the pyramids,
Mm-hmm.
a great people who invented mathematics, astronomy, astrology. You came from a people that gave us a richer understanding of the divine.
Mm,
You did not originate in slavery.
at all.
You've got African blood coursing through your veins, and you should be proud of that. The
Mm-hmm.
thing is, your ancestors, as you pointed out, with the help of some of our own folk,
Mm-hmm.
were sold out of Africa and brought to this country and treated as trash.
Yeah.
They were branded, they were castrated, they were whipped, they
Mm-hmm.
were raped, they
Mm-hmm.
were sold from their families. Um, they endured the most humiliating,
Mm-hmm.
the most degrading treatment of any people anywhere in history. And now that same mindset that allowed slavery, that allowed Jim Crow, that same mindset has been born again under under the umbrella of Make America Great Again.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they want to make America great again. to return people of color back to a position of servitude. And I would say
Yes.
for you to even consider voting for a party that wants to return you to that,
Mm-hmm.
you really seriously need some serious counseling and some
Mm-hmm.
serious medication and some serious therapy, because no individual in their right mind would even think that that's a choice.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so, when I look at the Tim Scotts,
God, woo, don't get me started.
you have to wonder, what was your actual pain that you could easily forget or not care about the ancestral trek? You have to wonder when you have I believe he's running for governor in South Carolina,
North
saying some
Carolina.
people just, North Carolina, some people just need to be killed. What do you mean? How irresponsible is that?
Like, bro.
I can't call him bro, because your skin may be brown, but you ain't
Well,
no brother.
yeah, well, okay, point well taken. I wonder too, what is it that made Tim Scott, Candace Owens, Clarence Thomas, um, Ben Carson, who I used to respect because
Yeah.
of the way that he came up, became a brain surgeon, and I don't know, that's another conversation. I'll get to that later. What what did you face that made you want to turn on your own people like that? And B, how much did you profit from it?
The profit part, I'm curious to see that, but I honestly, if I were to not necessarily put a therapeutic spin on it, but sometimes um, we get into a savior complex. And the savior complex in America is white.
Oh, yeah.
And because of that, it wouldn't matter what we know that Blacks have done, we know that Indians have done in this country. It wouldn't matter because they're not the savior. Right. They're not that white man. Because you remember back in the day, the closer you were to white, you were right.
That's true. That's true.
I honestly think that that's where it stems from, is that savior complex. And that savior complex, I often hear people talk about, well, Africans sold their own people. It was for survival. Let's talk about it for real. If they had not found some people to put on those ships, they would have burned down villages and taken so many lives and the whole 9 yards. So it was survival. Do they regret it? I'm certain they did.
Definitely do.
I'm certain they did. But that was a survival technique. This isn't survival. This is eat your own. The fact, and I really want to hear your perspective about this, the fact that the Heritage Foundation wants to put the Bible and to teach from the Bible in every school system. Now, I can guarantee they are not going to talk about things like the daughters, I believe that was Lot's daughters sleeping with him because he was too old to remember. They're not going to talk about the cannibalism where the two mothers were deciding on whose child was going to burn and be eaten first, and the other mother decided against it. They're not going to talk about how Solomon said, "Hey, they're not going to talk about those things." Wow. What is your perspective about the fact that we are going against church and state?
Well, not only that,
okay.
They're also not going to talk about Moses standing before Pharaoh and said, "Thus saith the Lord, let my people go."
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to talk about how the Jewish people kept their humanity, not only during slavery in Egypt, but in captivity in Babylon, and how most of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, reflects that angst that they faced during the Babylonian captivity and really strengthened Judaism during the Second Temple period. They're not going to talk about the Roman oppression of the Jewish people.
Right.
Of course, in the years leading up to the birth of Christ and several hundred years afterwards. They're not going to talk about that liberation piece. And you saw in 2008 how they attacked Jeremiah Wright. Well, what book was Jeremiah Wright coming from? He was coming from the Bible.
Period.
So when they wanted to force biblical lessons down people's throats, what it is, they're taking a sanitized, pasteurized interpretation of the Bible, examined through the filter of white supremacy and capitalism, misogyny, and toxic masculinity. That's the version that they want to impose upon.
Is that not what they did in slavery?
That is precisely what they did in slavery. They didn't tell the slaves any. First of all, they didn't want slaves reading anything.
Right.
And if they did read something from the scripture, they redacted it big time. And they always came from Paul. Servants, obey your masters. They always went to Paul. Paul was their go-to. And that same mentality we see in many elements of the white Protestant evangelical movement.
Exactly.
And let's not forget, during his lifetime in his ministry, people like Jerry Falwell opposed the civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
As did Pat Robertson in opposing sanctions for South Africa when he ran for president in '88. And so for some of our people to buy into that is collective cultural suicide.
It is, but here's what I know. And I've been called a heathen for this statement, and it's okay. I'll be that heathen. When you don't know the origin of words, you can easily bamboozle people to believe whatever you want them to believe.
True.
The Bible is no different.
Sure is.
People have misinterpreted scriptures and have abused people mentally, physically, and financially with those same scriptures, because most people won't study for themselves. I remember having a conversation with a young lady. She said, I learned very early in our interactions that I can't talk to you about the Bible. And I said to her, why? She said, well, you actually study. I go to church. I said, yeah, that's why I had to leave you church folks alone, because y'all don't actually read. You don't have a relationship. You have to understand the origin of words. You have to understand the time that the words were written. You have to understand the multiple translations that were enacted in order to make King James feel emboldened to be King James. You have to understand. Exactly. And most people won't see it that way. You will hear, well, these are God's words, but to a degree.
To an extent.
Because
some of the translations, but
not all 66 books. We just got to be real for what it is. That's and understand. But that is how these places of judgment are coming in. This is how I remember here in Georgia, an election, there was a young lady who was running. And when I asked her, and she came to something and she was taking questions, and I said, well, tell me why you're voting with the Republicans. And she said, because we have the same Christian values. I said, really? What are those? I said, because I don't think that it was meant for children to be hungry. I don't think that it was meant for children to be raped and prostituted by church heads. I don't think that it was meant for people to be in bondage. So what values are those? She ignored me, did not respond. So I went to her website and her Facebook and started posting those same questions. And of course, they blocked me. But the reality is people like the fantasy of Christianity. They don't like the truth.
Right.
And what are your thoughts about that? Because I'm
going to tell you exactly what I think.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you go into a lot of these churches,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not slamming Robert Powell as an actor. I think Robert Powell was an excellent actor. He did a great part in Jesus of Nazareth.
Mm-hmm.
He was even better in the miniseries about the composer Gustav Mahler.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus did not look like Robert Powell.
Period.
And even he said that. Powell was doing an interview and they were talking about the images of Jesus and all that. He said, listen, stop that. I am not Jesus. He said, you go out and you worship the real Jesus, because that's not me. But people have it in their heads that Jesus is this Nordic figure,
mm-hmm.
this Teutonic type figure who spoke 17th century English. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew of color, and he was a radical. Period. He preached the concept, and Oprah Hendricks talks about this in The Politics of Jesus. He preached the concept of Malkuth Shemayim, the coming kingdom of God. And that kingdom was to supplant the oppressive kingdom of Rome.
Yes.
And that's what got Jesus killed.
Exactly.
By
With
promoting
all
those
of these
ideas.
people, I would have to believe that this current supremacist mindset would be the same ones escorting Jesus to the hill for crucifixion. I have to believe that.
They would have.
Because he would have been so against the mindset that they have, their lack of love, their lack of empathy, their lack of humanly support for one another.
And their treatment of women.
Absolutely.
Because Jesus, during his ministry, revered women.
Absolutely.
He saw women as he respected women. Mm-hmm. He saw them in a place where they could easily be exploited. That's why he showed mercy to the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, because the law said she should be stoned, but mercy and grace should say she be given another chance.
Absolutely.
And Jesus understood that. And he also knew that no, she would not have been in adultery had there not been a demand for her services. So now, she wasn't committing adultery alone. We call that masturbation.
But why do you think there are so many right now attacking women? What is the fear that society has against women?
I wish I knew. It goes all the way back to this mythos of women being the weaker sex. When that's science tells us that that's certainly not true. Baby girls, health-wise, are far more healthier and stronger than young baby boys, and are far more mature when they hit their teenage years than young boys. I don't know. Maybe it's fear of being replaced.
That's part of it, I think, because that's the fear that's running rampant in the white community. That's why they're saying we're going to outlaw abortion and birth control, because of the fear of them being decreased from this supposedly power position. Right. It's just amazing to me how. It's amazing to me, one, how Black women have become the target again.
Oh my God, especially Black women.
It's just amazing to me.
And I'm gonna tell you something. If Vice President Harris is the Democratic nominee for president, you're gonna see people that you thought were progressive, that you thought were down. They are going to fool you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're going to see it in media coverage. You're going to see it around the water cooler. You're going to see it in the way that she is reported upon.
Well, they did that with Hillary. Remember when she ran? But this would be double what Hillary went through, because they were really targeting Hillary because she was a woman, and supposedly no woman with sympathy or no softness. With
Right. Yeah, they
Kamala, it's going to be 3 times worse.
uh-huh. She's
But
young, she's black,
mm-hmm,
she's married to a Jewish man. And you see how
mm-hmm.
they attack even JD. MAGA people even attack JD Vance's wife, who's Indian. But anyway, getting back to the vice president. She's
Which I just
articulate.
don't understand. Mm-hmm,
I don't get it either. She's very articulate. She knows who she is as a black
mm-hmm,
woman. She is a
mm-hmm,
product of an HBCU.
mm-hmm,
She was part of the Divine Nine, black fraternities and sororities.
mm-hmm,
She is a very brilliant lawyer and prosecutor. Now, you could question some of her views on how she handled prosecutions, but she was a
mm-hmm.
very, very astute attorney.
Right.
The way she stood up to Mike Pence in that debate, she will do that
Yes.
against Trump. She will do that against JD Vance.
Mm-hmm,
She
mm-hmm,
will bring a lot of pride to that, a lot of
mm-hmm,
strength to it, a lot of sass to it. And the one thing that I have noticed, black women get punished. I've seen it in the workplace. I've seen it in the universities, colleges, every place. Black women get punished more for expressing themselves and
mm-hmm.
their refusal to be insulted.
Absolutely. And it's so crazy that we're intellectual beings that are naturally strengthened to birth nations. And yet we are the biggest target in any person's eyesight, whether it's white population and even black men. We become the enemy of the state to everybody. When, if they would actually look at it, having a strong black woman as a partner, as a creator, will change the trajectory.
It would.
It just would. That's just our natural ability. And that's what's missing, I think, is there's such a fear that they would rather lose themselves to a dictator who only cares about himself. Because the truth is, let's face it, he only ran because he doesn't want to go to jail.
That's right. And
That's the
he's
bottom line.
self-absorbed. And he's self-absorbed.
And
Very
well,
self-absorbed.
self-absorbed, absolutely, but he only ran. And the only reason why the Heritage Foundation is actually sticking with him is because he has a cult-like mentality. The moment that they can get rid of Trump and push forward with Vance and whomever else is on their list, that is what they're going to do. It's it's such an evil perspective to
It
go
is.
on. But we could talk all night,
Oh,
and we
absolutely.
would. So we'll probably come back again between September and October, because I really want us to hit this season again. I really want us to come back
Yes.
after the Democratic
Yes.
convention, so that we can talk
Yes.
more about things. Do you have any closing words today?
I just thought about this. And this should be something that, I always talk about the negative part. If Trump becomes president, this is such and such, and thus and so will happen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to end by being a little bit more positive.
Okay.
If you have President Kamala Harris
Mm-hmm.
and you see her inner strength, you see that she is not a woman who can be bowled over. You are not going to pull the wool over her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And you see her going toe to toe with Vladimir Putin.
Oof, he would
Can you
cowl. He
can
would
you see?
cowl.
Yeah, can you see her tell Xi Jinping, if you go after Taiwan, we're coming after you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you see her telling Wall Street, no, we're not going back to the 1890s,
Mm-hmm.
and y'all
Mm-hmm.
going to pay your fair share of taxes?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing to see?
It would be a beautiful thing, which is why they're running scared. But here's what I would hope that people listening to this episode understands. You are more empowered than you think.
Mhm.
You have the right to choose the candidate that is going to be the best for you. Educate yourself in every state,
Mhm.
every local race that there is, elect the people that are choosing you, not just choosing them because of rhetoric, but because they're choosing you in the betterment of the country. Don't sell yourself short for somebody waving a couple of dollar signs in front of you. Don't sell yourself short because of any biases that you may have based on color or gender. Don't sell yourself short because of lack of knowledge. Get out there and understand. Brian and I are going to come back sometime in September so we can discuss what happened after the Democratic National Convention and what do we need to do to push forward in November so that we can pull a victory for the country. That's the goal. Brian, thank you again so
Marcia,
much.
thank you.
I
Thank you so
truly
much.
am honored. You're so welcome. I appreciate your openness. I appreciate your time. Thank you again. I look forward to us getting back together in September. Let's go ahead and knock it out the park and change the lives of people as we hit this election cycle. So
That's what
take good
we're gonna do.
care.
You do the
Don't
same.
You too. Don't forget to like, comment, and share on Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. Since you know that we're coming back in September, shoot us any questions so that we can bring those up as well. We really want to educate as many people as possible. Take good care. We'll see you on the next episode of Authentically Peculiar with Marcia.